This is what I want to talk about today is how can we as Stoics um, embrace tranquility, right? What can we do to get to deal with our anger? Let me introduce your speaker. I have been the host of Stoicons 2020, 21, 22, 23, and will be in 2024 again. And I was also the host of Stoicon X military. And by the way, what's not on this slide, I don't know why it didn't make it. I was host of the Stoicon in Tampa. And I think some of you, in fact, I know that some of you who are on this call, even at this very moment, were at that event in Tampa. So I've done some live events as well. Anyway, that's why I'm doing this thing that I'm doing. All right, what are we going to talk about today? This is why we're really here. What are we talking about? We are talking about on anger. And basically, what I'm going to talk in here is going to be specifically, I'm using Seneca's work, De Ira, on anger. And I'm going to talk about the things that Seneca has talked about anger. What do we get wrong about it? What are some of those myths? Um, what uh, what are our chances of maybe solving this problem, at least in a little bit for ourselves? By the way, one of my favorite books, of course, one of my favorite translations of De Ira, well, and it's a partial translation, but is this book, How to Keep Your Cool from Princeton University Press. James Romm did it. Um, I'm curious if I can't be the only cat that has this book, right? This is a book that I love so much that I've got the Kindle version, the printed version, I've got the Audible version. Um, One of the things about this that makes me just laugh is this thing on the cover. And on the cover, we see Martias, right? And it says, by the way, the figure says, a Roman losing his cool. Well, I love James. I love these books. I love Rob Tempio, who puts these together, but that's not a Roman. That's a Greek satyr. And in this, by the way, it is the perfect illustration for this book, however, because this satyr, Martius, loses his life to the god Apollo because basically he aggravates the god Apollo by his own hubris. He goes, you know what? I think I can play this instrument as well as you can play this instrument. And the god Apollo challenges him. And it turns out that the god Apollo cheats a little bit in this thing. And when he does, um, Mardius loses this. And then he decides that the penalty for this is that Mardius will be flayed alive. Basically, he takes the skin off of him, and this is a German statue, which is in the Met of this. It's a marble bust of Martius in this, and it's just fantastic, and it's agonizing. But it's a Greek dude, not a Roman dude. Anyway, send a note to Rob or maybe James sometime and let him know. Uh, All right, wrong slide. What does Seneca say about anger? Does anybody know who this angry dude is? That's a thumbs up moment, by the way. I think we probably got this one figured out pretty well. Hugh Jackman. It's not Hugh Jackman. That's not who we're looking at, right? We're looking at Wolverine. And he is a cranky cat. He is a guy that is mad all of the time. And what did Seneca say about this? He said the problem with anger is that anger is a kind of madness. And this madness comes about because we set a high price on worthless things, he says. And I think that's exactly right, right? I mean, what brings us to being angry is that we overvalue a thing. Seneca goes on to say, but by the way, it rushes to arms and it greedily seeks a vengeance that will only drag you down with it. Being mad, some people said, look, I'm angry because so and so isn't listening to me. And I think what I'm going to do is I will use a little bit of violence, a little bit of anger to make sure they pay attention to me. And what invariably happens is that someone pays attention, and then that's the last time you ever have a conversation with them, right? I think about the number of people that I've had in my life over the years that I no longer have in my life because they just can't control their anger. And I just thought it wasn't a lot of fun to hang around, and I thought I would go do something else with my time. And I think I can't be the only person that's like that. And probably some of you have been in a situation where sometimes somebody expresses their anger in some way that it ruins a relationship. And this is one of the reasons I think we don't want to do it. All right, let's one more quote from Seneca. And by the way, a couple things here. All of these slides, everything that has quotation marks on it, this is, I think, the last time I do it. I mark that these are Seneca, and these are all from De Ira, or On Anger, this essay. So unless I say otherwise, every quote in this slide deck is actually out of one of those translations, not necessarily James Rams's translation. But Seneca goes on to say, wise men called anger brief madness in equal degrees. It's unable to govern itself. It forgets decorum. It's ignorant of friendships. I mean, weren't we there? Isn't that the thing we wanted to preserve to begin with? Did we need to be mad to make that work? We are obstinate intent on finishing what it begins. It's deaf to reason and advice. It's stirred up by empty provocations, unsuited to distinguishing what's just and true. It resembles nothing more than a burning building. He says collapsing building, but you get it. All right, let's talk about what some of the common myths are with anger, because it must have some utility, right? By the way, I don't know that we're going to address a bunch of utility, but we're going to address some of the myths in this slide. First off, myth number one, anger is necessary for courage and action. By the way, Seneca didn't believe that, but there were philosophers that did, right? Aristotle thought that anger was a necessary thing, but Seneca didn't think it. He says, listen, anger is not necessary for me to be courageous. The only thing I need to be courageous is reason. He was saying that the highest level, right? The highest functioning of our brain, right? We can be, if we are a rational and reasonable human being, then we are going to be able to be courageous. We will do the right thing in the right moment. We can be this cat, right? He gives the example, by the way, that an angry gladiator might expose themselves to wounds when they're angry. And by the way, why would we do this, right? Why would we actually be that person that in that moment doesn't exercise good judgment, doesn't exercise reason? Instead, we let anger get away from us, and basically we let our guard down. Myth number two, anger is a sign of strength and power. By the way, another famous cat out of that same movie. But we don't. Is this true? Is anger actually how we are going to assert dominance? By the way, in this case, we're talking mostly about Seneca, but a behavioral person, right? A therapist, a cognitive behavioral therapist, somebody like that, a psychologist will tell you that actually anger gives you the illusion of control. It doesn't give you actual control, right? So basically, one of the things it's doing is our brain gets all hyped up on these chemicals, and we think that we are in control, and that's why we say terrible things. But in this case, we actually might lose this altogether. We might lose the idea that we actually want to act with reason and instead act out of anger, and we let our defenses down. And this is what happens. We might lay aside and we basically hurt ourselves, is what Seneca's saying. By the way, myth number three is that anger is a righteous response to injustice. And this doesn't work either, right? And by the way, Seneca goes on to give examples of this. Caesar flogs his, I think this case is, his Keister, his aide, right? To someone who was actually, of course, everybody worked for Caesar at the time, right? But this is someone who was in his employ, right? And he's saying that we might, even in that case, take someone that we care about, someone that is doing good work for us, and we might decide to just overreact. And there's lots of stories inside of Stoicism which just run away with us, right? And we don't want to do that. So here's the question we're really here to solve today. How can we keep ourselves from getting angry? Well, Seneca gives us four things inside of De Ira, of four ideas that we can use to do this, right? And so we're going to talk about them. What are our triggers? How can we find allies? How do we build this fortress or this thing inside of ourselves? And then how can we detach from our own results as a technique for doing this? First off, know what your triggers are. And this is what Seneca says. Some men take offense at insulting words, others at deeds, some at a pedigree. And he goes on to list a whole bunch of things, reputations, actions, etc. But you got to love this picture, right? Here's a dude who's getting upset in traffic. All right. Thumbs up if you've ever been upset when someone cut you off in traffic. I mean, I get it. Maybe you're out in a world where that doesn't ever happen to you. But to me, I think there's really fewer places that are fantastic for practicing your stoicism than being in traffic with others. You're in you're in a room or in a place that's got all of these people that have got their own agendas, and we don't know what those agendas are exactly. And everyone feels like it's their road to go do their thing on, right? So Seneca says, figure out what those are. So it might be that, it might be, we have this legend. No, I'm sorry, it's not a legend, it's a truth. It's not a myth. It's the Karen, the model, the exemplar of the person who's standing in line at a Starbucks who doesn't get their cafe mochiata or whatever, and whoever exactly the kind of oat milk that they wanted it. By the way, it's Starbucks. If you want to go practice telling people what you want, it's a great place to go practice giving crazy orders about things. But there are people who, if they don't get what they want, then they throw a tantrum. Um, this isn't what we want to be, right? And we should know this is what know our triggers means, that some people take offenses and that we take offenses in various places. Let's not do that. Let's figure out what those are. Another thing we can do is that we know that we need to have allies, right? How do we choose our allies in this, right? So, Seneca says, no animal, however ferocious, continues to be wild if it's around other calm people. I have worked in work environments where anger and ferocity were valued in the workplace. It's stressful. It's difficult. It's not a fun place to work, right? And so, what can you do about that? Hopefully, you can find a way and find a place that you can choose the people that you're going to be around to spend your working hours with. And this is one of the things that Seneca is trying to tell us as well. Choose our allies in this. Um, Next on this list, he says, build a fortress. And basically, he's saying, look, we got to keep track of our asset, the human being that is us. And the way we do that is by living in moderation. He's saying, look, take a walk, figure this out. But keep yourself, by the way, I know that that if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not getting enough exercise, if you're not eating right, if you're not well hydrated, all of these things lead your body into an agitated state. And basically, it's so much easier to be angry right then. So the question is, can you do anything about that? Can you moderate that? And that's what Seneca is trying to get us to believe as well here, right? In fact, I like this at the bottom. I put this in specific. By the way, these are all quotes, even without the quotation marks. Games also will be useful for moderate pleasure, relieves the mind, and brings to a proper balance. So if sit in front of the TV for a little bit is actually going to calm you down, do that for a little bit. Last thing Seneca says in terms of our things that we're going to talk about beforehand is be reasonable. Whatever you would attempt, first estimate your own power. So basically, we want you we want you to realize that some things just aren't going to work out. And being angry about that doesn't actually help, does it? Of course, this is a bust or a marble statue of a Stoic archer, is what I saw, right? I see this archer, and what does the Stoic archer tell us? You know what? I got a great bow. I've got all the practice. I've done everything I can. I've got a fantastic arrow. I'm going to pull that thing back. But when I let go, it's not up to me anymore, right? Everything that was up to me was what happened before I before I let go of the arrow. And so Seneca is saying, all right, let's get that figured out. All right. So these are the four things that we said that we can do before we're ever in a situation. Let's talk about the things that we can do when we're in the situation, right? How do we disarm anger when it's actually happening? I've got 5 of those for you. First off, here are the 5. Stoic pause, change perspective, challenging your inner narrator, taming the beast, and seeking counsel, not fuel. Let's go through all of those. First one is the Stoic pause. All right. Seneca, inside of De Iro, tells the story of angry Plato and how he stopped his hand. I have a picture here, of course, not of Lori Daughtery, but of Bill Irvin, right? And Bill Irvin's the guy that actually has popularized this idea of the Stoic pause, but it's a well-known cognitive trick, right? How can we take and give ourselves 30 seconds to not respond to a thing in and of the moment. And we call that the Stoic pause. So what does that mean? That means we're in a spot where something is going on. We think that it's going to make us upset. And basically what we're going to do in and of that moment is go, hold on a second. I am getting wound up. And this is not going to help the situation, right? So in that moment, I say, okay, give myself time to get myself calmed back down before I respond. This is Bill Irvin's Stoic Pause. It's useful all of the time. I have, by the way, let me just tell you on my side, I have a little trick for this, not for the pause part, because I get the pause, just use the 30 seconds, do that thing. For me, if I feel my jaw clench, I know that's one of my physical things that's happening that lets me know that I'm getting upset or I'm building tension in and of the moment, right? And so at that moment, I go, all right, something's happening here. I need to pay attention to my body. Could be, some people tell me it's in their stomach. A lot of people tell me it's in their jaws or in their head. But wherever it is, pay attention and then go, now's the time for me to take that 30-second pause. Right. Next, what does Seneca tell us to do? He says, listen, how about instead we change perspective and we take the point of view of the person we're angry at? What do they think is happening? And so this is one of those points where we go, hold on a second. How would they describe this situation right here, right now? What would they say is going on? And would I still be mad if I had their point of view? And that's what changing perspective will let us do. Next thing Seneca tells us to do is to challenge our inner narrator. He says, we are influenced, but I think it's a time, again, we can do this, by the way, during the Stoic pause. We can ask ourselves, hold on a second. Why am I mad? I mean, am I mad because the coffee wasn't hot? Am I mad because it has the wrong kind of cream in it? Does that make sense? Does it help? Is that something that I could really spend any time with? Would that make any sense? By the way, Daniel Fryer, who we had last month for conversations, used REBT to challenge our beliefs. Fantastic episode. Go back and watch that tape. It's out there. That was 2 months ago, I guess. But anyway, fantastic. All right, next up. Seneca says, tame the beast. Listen, if you can't be less angry, how about you just act less angry, right? Just for the moment, just pretend. What would a non-angry person look like? He says, compose your countenance, make your voice mild, don't agitate, don't aggravate, and slow yourself down. And, he doesn't actually say this because he's not a breath guy, but in this case, it could be, how about I take a few deep breaths and I look like a calm person, and then will the rest of my brain catch up with my body if I can make that happen? And I like that one a lot. All right. Last on this list of things to do in of the moment, if you think you need help with this, get the help. A good man delights in receiving help, says Seneca. Get it wherever you think you need it. So we are here to talk to you about, philosophical stoicism. How does that help good people be better? How do we become better humans doing this? But if your anger has gotten out of control and you need help, go get that help, right? Don't just kind of read your way through it. Go get the help that you need. We're big believers in that. All right. So let me just wrap these up here because we're at time. I've given you 9 ideas for conquering anger, and these are all from Seneca's treatise, his essay on anger. So there's the 4 from beforehand and the 5 after that, right? So this is what I wanted you to think. I wanted to give you the tools. I think Seneca is giving the tools. Places I would go back and spend some more time reading if I were you and I were interested. I love these translations of Seneca that are here, right? So this is the Chicago University Press one, right? The Oxford University Press. And then, of course, James Romm's Dying Every Day, I think is just absolutely a magical book. By the way, Seneca wrote De Ira after his stint with Caligula and before his stint with Nero. So just in case you're trying to put that all in place. And by the way, one of the reasons that I love James Romm book is James Romm takes all of the essays and the letters and everything, and he puts them in time sequence. So you can understand what Seneca is doing when. And since we think of our primary influence from Seneca, of course, is the letters. And what I mean by that is, there's what, 150 letters, right? We read the letters. These are all written at the end of Seneca's life. Seneca is at that time basically rehabilitating his reputation in the world. But it's a great source of practical advice because he was writing the original Dear Abby was not Dear Abby. It was Dear Seneca, except it was Dear Lucilius or Lucilius, right? He's writing to his friend, it seems like.